Hi, welcome to Crime Clueless. We're your hosts. I'm Jenna.
And I'm Kayla.
Today, we are covering the psychology of an alibi. So we're going to be talking about how liars cover their tracks.
Oh, I'm excited.
Yeah, it should be a good one. I'm excited too. You want to jump right in?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Today, we are going to explore the different ways that criminals fake innocence, from phony alibis, crocodile tears, or maybe lack of tears, their overly detailed stories, and how really good investigators see right through them. We've got some good academic insights from psychology, forensic analysis techniques, and some infamous cases where a killer's alibi completely unraveled. So think Scott Peterson and Chris Watts. Buckle up. This is going to be a wild ride.
Oh, I'm excited. I just read a book recently that was a murder mystery. And so it's interesting to find out like who the killer was and kind of digging into their alibi more. Like I thought that was interesting. So,
yeah. What was the title? Was it a good one?
Yes, it was called The Perfect Marriage. There's a sequel called The Perfect Divorce, which I would like to listen to as well, but I haven't, or read. But I was going to listen to it when I was driving home from Utah and I got distracted. So
happens to the best of us.
But yes, if you need a good murder mystery, that one was definitely interesting.
Oh, I like it. I love a good recommendation. All right. Well, first, super quick, what do we mean by alibi? In crime terms, an alibi is basically proof you weren't at the scene of the crime. It's your claim of, I was somewhere else, ask anyone. Usually, it involves a time and place. I couldn't have done it. I was at Olive Garden all night. Endless pasta bowl. I have the receipts to prove it.
Pasta. There's no way I could be there.
Exactly. If the alibi checks out, it can exonerate you. And if it's fake, well, then that's when the psychology of lying kicks in.
Well, criminals who need an alibi have two options. We've talked about concealment or fabrication. Concealment is when you omit the truth. Like you just don't mention you snuck out at midnight, but if you were actually at the crime scene, simply withholding info, isn't enough. You have to make up a story to kind of cover that time. And, obviously that would be hard, thinking on the spot, trying to remember exactly what you said, every little detail, keeping those straight, and then hoping that evidence doesn't contradict you.
Right. Psychologists often say lying is more cognitively demanding than telling the truth.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
You are essentially juggling reality and fiction in your head. One study even found liars have to use their working memory a ton because they interweave truth and lies to sound believable. So, fun fact, most liars admit they mix a bit of truth into their lies because apparently pure fiction is too hard to sell, which makes sense. If you're inventing a fake alibi, you better be quick on your mental feet.
I like that's where most criminals are going to flop pretty spectacularly. Their alibi might start strong, but under pressure, fall apart. When those inconsistencies pop up, evidence says no, or their own behavior kind of gives them away. Let's break down some common tactics that liars use to fake innocence, and then let's kind of go into how those backfire.
Perfect. There are a few classic strategies that criminals use to appear innocent. The first is an obvious one. They fabricate an alibi from scratch. Claim you were anywhere except the crime scene. This could mean saying you were at work, at a friend's house, asleep in bed, whatever sounds plausible. I listened to a story today where he said he was asleep in bed. Some even get creative and stage evidence, like clocking in on a work computer, having a friend clock in on a work computer for them, keeping store receipts, or leaving their phone in a location to ping off different cell towers. Sneaky.
That is sneaky. I mean, that's smart, though, because especially nowadays where your phone tracks everywhere that you are.
Yes.
I mean, that's a pretty easy way to track someone.
Absolutely.
Like liars often screw up the details. They might overcomplicate the story or maybe not include enough detail, ironically. One study noted liars often try to keep their story simple. They're afraid too many details could give investigators leads to check or be hard to remember later. So a liar might say, I was home watching Netflix, but can't recall which show when asked. Truth tellers, on the other hand, tend to be more forthcoming. they actually did what they're saying they did.
Right. If a liar does throw in details, watch out for those that don't make sense, or maybe they don't stay consistent. The truth doesn't change, but lies often do. We'll see that in our case examples. Also, liars must avoid contradicting any hard evidence. As one FBI analyst put it, if you lie about your whereabouts, you must fabricate a story. There's no half measure, and you risk getting caught in that lie if evidence, like, video, surveillance, or GPS says otherwise.
So, perfect example, which you already mentioned, Scott Peterson. He spun an alibi about what he was doing the day his wife Lacey went missing. At first, he told Lacey's family he'd been fishing that day. Then he told other relatives and neighbors he was golfing. Whoops. Get your story straight.
Yeah.
In court, prosecutors highlighted these inconsistencies. He gave different accounts to different people about being at the marina versus the golf course. Classic case of liar unable to keep track of his own lies. So we'll dive deeper into that story in a bit.
Yes. Another one, criminals might recruit a friend or a family member to lie for them, which is called an alibi witness. Think of someone swearing, "Oh yeah, he was on my couch all night." Sometimes people genuinely believe the suspect is innocent, so they're willing to cover for them. For instance, the UK's notorious Soham murder case, the killer, Ian Huntley's girlfriend, Maxine Carr, provided a fake alibi. She claimed that he was with her the whole time. She later said she only lied because she thought he was innocent. The little charade didn't last. Once evidence mounted, her false alibi collapsed, and she ended up convicted for lying about this. So, moral, backing up a liar can land you in hot water too.
Yeah, I mean, that checks out.
Yeah.
So, number 2, the emotional performance or lack thereof. So, our next tactic, putting on an emotional show. This can go one of two ways, overplaying or underplaying. Some criminals turn on the waterworks, hoping that acting heartbroken will deflect suspicion. Others go the opposite route and appear weirdly calm or emotionless, thinking it makes them look normal. Either extreme can be a red flag if it doesn't fit the situation.
We've all seen those televised pleas where a suspect, who's not officially a suspect yet, sobs and begs for a missing loved one's return, only to later be revealed as the perpetrator. A famous example is Susan Smith, who, and this is awful, in 1994 went on TV crying her eyes out, claiming a carjacker kidnapped her 2 little boys. The nation, of course, was heartbroken for her until 9 days later when she confessed to drowning her own children. Yeah. And the whole carjacking,
horrible.
right? And she's not even the only mom who's done this before, which is terrible.
That is terrible.
Yeah. The whole carjacking tale was completely made up. She even fabricated a phantom suspect, a Black man playing into racist stereotypes to bolster her innocence. Talk about a disgusting ruse. In the end, Susan's emotional performance couldn't hide the inconsistencies in her story. And under intense scrutiny, she finally buckled and told the truth.
On the flip side, let's talk about Chris Watts. If you don't know Chris Watts, that's an appropriate reaction there.
Yeah, thanks.
He's the Colorado dad who in 2018 killed his pregnant wife, Shannon, and their 2 little girls, then pretended to be the worried husband-father on the news. His emotional effect was basically non-existent. In his TV interview pleading for his family's return, he was disturbingly flat. No tears, monotone voice, even a slight nervous grin at times. Psychology experts noted that Watts appeared emotionless, unaffected, and scripted. He said things like, "This is tearing me apart," but showed zero real anguish. Huge red flag. That kind of makes me think of the book Gone Girl.
Oh, yeah.
Or the movie. I mean, he was innocent, but on TV, he had no emotion. And so everybody played into it thinking that it was him because he didn't have any emotion that she was gone.
Right. Which is so wild. With Watts, when detectives questioned him, they noticed the same thing. He never cried. He never showed authentic tears for his missing family. And in fact, he only shed tears after he failed a polygraph and started confessing, which basically was when he realized he was caught and his own life was ruined. The only thing that made him cry was his predicament. not the fact that his wife and
Horrible.
kids had been murdered. As one expert put it, no tears when he talked about killing the girls. The only time we saw tears is when talking about what's going to happen to him. Ugh, it's awful, and it says it all.
So terrible.
He's a monster.
Yes, 100% a monster.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy, though, that like either way, over the top crying or creepy stoicism, investigators get suspicious if the emotion doesn't match the context. I mean, all humans have some expected baseline reactions to trauma. If you're giggling or totally composed right after your family is massacred, or conversely, if you're wailing dramatically with dry eyes, anyone trained like a detective is going to take note of that.
Oh, exactly. And that's not to say that everyone reacts the same way to shock. Of course, there are people who get completely quiet that have we've covered cases like that where they thought he was too emotional or on the flip side, not emotional enough.
Yeah.
Some innocent people seem numb. People do go into shock, and some really are emotional and cry a ton. But seasoned investigators look for authenticity. Are the emotions consistent over time? Do they appear and disappear conveniently? Do the person's words match their affect? In Watts' case, his demeanor was all wrong for a frightened, grieving husband. One psychologist said Watts was essentially staging his body language, standing stiffly with arms crossed, like he was trying to hold himself together and control his reactions. It ended up looking more like an actor playing a role than a man who was in anguish.
Speaking of acting, we can't forget the term duping delight, which is a fun term, meaning the secret joy some liars get from fooling people. Yes, some criminals actually get a kick out of lying. Psychopaths, we're looking at you. If a suspect is hiding a smile or seems a little too pleased with themselves, that could be duping delight peeking through. For example, a killer might smirk subtly during a press interview about the victim because internally they're like, ha, I'm getting away with it. Super creepy, but it happens.
It's super creepy. Those ones always creep me out the most.
I just it's weird that it seems like a game to them,
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So after emotions, we have the storytelling gymnastics, which is like over detailed or changing a story. Liars often think more detail equals more believable. So sometimes they'll concoct a story with an absurd amount of minute details or a very tight timeline to seem convincing. Ironically, truthful people often don't volunteer a ton of unnecessary detail at first because, unlike liars, they're not crafting a narrative. They're just answering questions, and they might assume the truth is obvious.
Right. If someone is doing a novel exactly about what they did every minute, at 6 p.m., I fed the cat hearing a salmon flavor for 3 minutes. Then at 6:03, I turned on the TV to channel 5. That could be true, but I don't feel like any normal person is actually going to be taking note of the time. It seems you rehearse the story to plug any holes. Overly pat stories make detectives raise an eyebrow. Real memories have gaps. People who are too perfect in their recall might be faking it. For me, I feed my dog at around the same time every night, but not exactly. I don't ever pay attention to exactly what time we come in from the walk, what time I feed her.
It's like I usually get home at this time. So I usually, it's not to the minute, right?
Right. No.
Even more telling is when a story changes over time. If you're innocent, your core story should stay pretty consistent, barring small clarifications. They might ask you what kind of food you fed, so then you would tell them. Liars often can't keep track of their lies, or they adjust the tale as new evidence emerges. We saw this with Chris Watts. Initially, he claimed he had no idea what happened to his family. Once police cornered him with evidence, he suddenly spun a new story, which is even more awful. He said that Shannon, his wife, had killed the kids, and then he killed her in a rage. That was completely different from his first version of events. And of course, a total lie, by the way. Changing your account so drastically is a neon sign of deception. Nobody was buying Watts' revised story, just to be clear.
Good. Yeah, they should not have been. Going back to Scott Peterson, even within the first day where he's giving multiple versions of his whereabouts, fishing versus golfing, that's a big no-no. Investigators are going to pick up on those inconsistencies. They also noticed that Scott couldn't even name what bait or fish he was going for on this supposed impromptu fishing trip. A small detail, but a fisherman who isn't sure what he's fishing for, suspicious.
Right. People. Okay. And
well, it should be easy. Like, yeah, I'm at this river. They have trout. Like,
yeah, right. But I guess you haven't thought about all the details, or you think about too many. I don't know.
Well, one, I mean, that's something that you should just know if you're innocent. But two, like, even if he is an avid fisher, shouldn't you just know that anyway?
You would think.
If you're trying to be a good liar, then say, oh, yeah, I was at this river that I go to all the time. I always try and catch trout.
Yeah, but I guess when you don't go fishing, by the Golden Gate Bridge, usually you don't know what you're going to catch there.
Right, that's true.
Another aspect is verbal cues in the story. Liars may slip by using distancing language by saying that woman instead of my wife. Yikes.
Oh, that's interesting.
Or by accidentally referring to someone in past tense when supposedly they think the person is alive. Tiny verbal slips can betray knowledge of guilt. For example, if during the search, Scott Peterson had said, I hope she comes home versus I hope we find her. Subtle, but investigators listen for any hint that the suspect is mentally distancing themselves from the victim or revealing knowledge after death. In Chris Swatt's case, analysts pointed out he spoke in a very self-centered way during the interview, and he sometimes slipped into past tense talking about his daughters before they'd been found.
Ugh.
Yeah.
Modern psychological research actually suggests that verbal cues are more reliable than body language when detecting lies. We as humans tend to fixate on the stereotypical body language of liars, like shifty eyes or fidgeting, but studies show those nonverbal cues aren't very reliable. Truth tellers can be nervous too. Being innocent doesn't automatically make you a chill cucumber in a police interview. I mean, I wouldn't be. I'd still be nervous.
Yeah, totally.
So it's important that investigators focus a lot on what is being said, not just how it's said, looking for contradictions, evasions, or statements that just don't add up.
One cool strategy that professionals use is to make the suspect tell their story multiple times or to tell it backwards.
Oh, that's smart.
Right? If someone's being truthful, repeating the story might bring out more details as they remember more, or at least the story remains logically the same. But liars often memorize a script. They stick to a very limited account to avoid tripping up. So when they're made to recount events again or backwards, or even again but in a different order or with extra interruptions, a liar will often stumble or contradict themselves. There was a study that found that when suspects were asked to recount their story in reverse order, which increases the cognitive load that we talked about, police were able to spot lies at a much higher rate, up to 87% accuracy in that experiment, which is huge. Investigators know that lying is mentally taxing, so they strategically make it even more taxing to break the liar's composure.
Basically, pro tip, if you ever find yourself cooking up a fake alibi, I mean, please don't become a murderer, but hypothetically, be aware that detectives have these crafty methods. They might withhold evidence and let you lie, then later present proof that shatters your story, the old strategic use of evidence technique, or they'll ask you open-ended questions and encourage you to volunteer details. Fun fact, honest folks are more likely to mention other people or things that can verify their story. Like I talked to the barista at 8 p.m., whereas liars avoid mentioning verifiable details. I mean, obviously they don't want the cops checking or trying to interview people. But if a suspect can't provide any detail that can be cross-checked, no witnesses, no receipts, nothing, that's telling.
And of course, in today's world, technology often crashes the liar's party. We live in the age of digital footprints. We have cell phone GPS. You've got CCTV cameras everywhere, emails, timestamps, Fitbits. These can all demolish a fake alibi. One wild example is called, now, the Fitbit murder case.
I haven't heard of this one.
No. In 2015, a Connecticut man named Richard Debate claimed an intruder broke in and killed his wife. and he gave a timeline of events to police. Unluckily for him, his wife was wearing a Fitbit fitness tracker, which showed she was up and moving an hour after the time Richard said she was killed, and even walked 1,200 steps around the house when he claimed she was shot upon him arriving home. In reality, he did it. That Fitbit data flat out contradicted his alibi. Investigators also found an email that he had sent from his computer at home at a time he told police he was driving on the road. Come on. Another lie exposed digitally. Needless to say, Mr. DeBate's alibi crumbled and he was convicted. Technology for the win.
I mean, not that it's comforting, but it's a little comforting that if I'm murdered, it's a little bit hard for them to get away with it at this point, you know?
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, these days, if you lie about being at home all night, you better hope that your phone wasn't pinging cell towers near the crime scene or that a Ring doorbell cam on the street didn't catch your car driving by. Getting harder and harder for people to cover their tracks. Thank you, gadgets, satellites, doing the good work.
Absolutely. Let's dive in a little bit more to some of these cases that we've talked about of liars and their, leaky alibis. We teased a couple already, but let's dig in and just see what happened. So Scott Peterson, we know this case. It's infamous. On Christmas Eve 2002 in California, Scott's pregnant wife, Lacey Peterson, disappeared. From the get-go, Scott served up an alibi that smelled fishy, pun intended. He told some people, like his mother-in-law, that he had been fishing at the bay that day. But he told others, like neighbors and Lacey's uncle, that he was playing golf. Fishing or golfing? Which was it, Scott?
You can't be doing both.
No. And also on Christmas Eve, really, dude?
Yeah.
Right away, police noticed this glaring inconsistency in his timeline.
Yes, and thankfully it only got worse for him. As the investigation unfolded, Scott's lies piled up. He initially denied having an extramarital affair, but surprise, he was involved with another woman named Amber. He lied to police and to Amber about being married. In fact, about 2 weeks before Lacey vanished, he told Amber that he had lost his wife and this would be his first Christmas without her. A total lie since Lacey was very much alive at that point. That showed investigators premeditation. He was already speaking as if Lacey was gone.
Awful. And Amber was a superhero in that case and luckily came forward. So Scott, caught in his lies, did what many guilty people do. He kept lying. During the search, he tried to appear helpful, but said really odd things. Famously, he called the police the day after Lacey went missing and asked, "Hey, are you using cadaver dogs to find her?" So think about that.
What?
At that point, officially, she was just a missing person. Why would a hopeful husband immediately inquire about cadaver dogs? The detective basically responded, we haven't assumed she's dead, sir. That was a huge slip up, almost like Scott betrayed his own knowledge that Lacey was dead.
Those kind of unconscious hints that trip liars up. Investigators later said that comment set the stage for the case because it was so telling of his guilty mindset. And guess what? Scott's big fancy alibi about fishing didn't hold water. Boom. Another pun.
Nailed it. Oh, we're good. Nailed it.
Didn't hold water once evidence came in. They found Lacey's body in the bay where Scott claimed he went fishing, exactly where he had been on the 24th. He was the only one who supposedly knew she was there. All his story switching and shady behavior, like he dyed his hair, had a bunch of cash and his brother's ID on him when arrested, possibly planning to flee, made it pretty clear he was lying to cover up murder. The jury didn't buy his alibi for a second.
Nope. The Scott Peterson case teaches us that inconsistency is the enemy of a liar. By telling multiple stories and getting caught in them, he practically painted a target on his back. Each lie was a thread the prosecutors pulled to unravel the whole fabric of his alibi.
Well,
yeah.
I'm glad he was a terrible liar.
Me too. Most people are.
Yeah, that's true. Well, now let's talk about Chris Watts again. The guy we mentioned who killed his whole family in 2018. I dove deep into this case and it's incredibly sad. Chris initially tried the I'm a distraught husband act on local news. He pleaded for his missing wife and daughters to come home. But as we said, his performance was bizarrely flat. No genuine emotion, just words. Body language experts and criminal psychologists immediately got bad vibes. They noted how self centered his statements were. He talked a lot about his feelings and how he wanted his family back. But there was this absence of authentic concern for the victims. It was all about him. Not to mention, he referred to the kids in past tense at times and had this slight smile that came and went. Viewers
Creepy.
literally called the police tip line to say, look at the husband, he seems off.
And that's saying something.
Yeah.
When the police brought Chris in for questioning, they played it smart. They let him talk, and boy, did he lie. He stuck to his story that he had no idea where his family went. Meanwhile, evidence was quietly stacking up, inconsistencies in his account, a neighbor's CCTV showing Chris loading something into his truck at 5 a.m., and phone data. The investigators even had him take a polygraph, which he failed spectacularly. And we're going to cover polygraphs soon because I find those fascinating.
They are fascinating. But also, if you're lying and you know you're lying, why would you agree to take a polygraph test?
Dude, they're so narcissistic. They think that they can beat it. Or they think that they've got their story so locked in, it's quote unquote truth to them.
Yeah.
But it always blows my mind that they'll agree to take it.
Seriously.
They think it will clear them if they pass. I don't know.
They're still going to look at you. It's not 100%. Yeah, okay, you didn't do it.
I know, right? And it's not like it can be used in court anyways. So
yeah.
Dumb. Yeah. After the polygraph, they confronted him. And what did he do? He changed his story entirely. He suddenly claimed that his wife had hurt the kids and he only killed her in revenge or some kind of rage. It was a desperate, made up on the spot alibi. And needless to say, nobody bought that.
Good.
Yeah.
The interrogators later said Chris's lack of real emotion was one of the big tells. They even tried showing him pictures of his daughters during the interrogation to gauge his reaction. A normal dad would break down at that point, but Chris, stone cold. No tears, no visible pain. Only once he knew he was caught did he finally cry, and that was for himself, not even for his family. That's terrible.
It's so awful. I don't understand.
Don't either. But at that point, it's game over for his lies. He eventually pleaded guilty to the murders.
His case highlights how behavioral clues plus evidence together can crack an alibi. His body language and verbal cues were screaming deception. And when matched with the forensic evidence, all the inconsistencies in his timeline, the physical evidence, CCTV, his I'm innocent facade collapsed.
Plus, like Peterson, Watts had a motive he was hiding, an affair. He, too, was seeing someone else and wanted a new life. Investigators quickly hone in on these motives because if you're lying about something like an affair, you might be lying about other things. Watts lied about pretty much everything until he couldn't anymore.
Terrible. Another notable example is Susan Smith in 1994. As we had mentioned, she staged a fake carjacking and tearfully pleaded that a stranger had abducted her kids. Investigators grew suspicious when aspects of her story didn't add up. For one, the location and her timeline were fishy. Typically, carjackers don't kidnap children, and everything about her, like her emotional response and everything, was off. After intense interrogation over 9 days and the fact that no evidence of this phantom carjacker emerged, Susan then confessed that her story was fabricated and she had actually drowned her own sons. Ironically, part of what undid her was that she covered her tracks, quote unquote, too well. She expected the car to be found in the lake quickly to support her lie. And when it wasn't, the pressure mounted and she cracked.
Then there was Charles Stewart from 1989 in a case with eerie similarities to Susan Smith. Charles Stewart shot his pregnant wife in Boston and then shot himself non-fatally, claiming a black man had attacked them during a robbery. Very racist.
Very.
His alibi ignited a massive and tragically misguided manhunt for an innocent suspect. For a while, people believed him. His own gunshot injury lent him credibility. But inconsistencies and suspicions grew. His story had holes, and why would a robber randomly shoot a woman and her husband and not take anything? Eventually, the truth surfaced. Charles' own brother came forward implicating him. Once exposed, Stewart's entire life collapsed. Facing arrest, he completed suicide by jumping off a bridge. His attempt to fake innocence by scapegoating someone else not only failed, it also inflicted great harm on the community.
Yeah, we need to cover the Charles Stewart case soon. It is a really fascinating one and so tragic.
That would be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Another example that we mentioned is the 2015 Fitbit murder and Richard Debate. He staged the home invasion scenario, telling police this masked intruder killed his wife. And when they looked at the digital evidence, it shredded his alibi. His wife's Fitbit showed movement long after Richard had claimed she had been killed, which completely unraveled his own timeline. There were no signs of a break-in, and Richard's own actions, like emailing from home when he said he wasn't there, how do you not know that, betrayed him. His motive, he had a pregnant girlfriend and financial problems. It's classic and so sad. Once the tech evidence came in, his alibi was toast, and he was finally convicted in 2022.
Finally, another notable case that I'm sure we're all familiar with is Casey Anthony from 2008. This one's a bit different since she was acquitted in court, but it's worth mentioning her astronomical web of lies. When Casey's 2-year-old daughter Kaylee was missing, Casey lied to police about everything. She claimed a non-existent nanny kidnapped Kaylee, lied about working at Universal Studios, even led officers around the building until finally admitting she didn't work there, and honestly just made up so many stories that it was hard to keep track.
While the jury didn't find enough proof to convict her of murder, her mountain of lies was indisputable. It showed how far someone will go to fake innocence, creating an elaborate fiction with fake people and places. Casey's continuously shifting story and 31 days of not reporting her daughter missing made her the prime suspect in the public eye, even though legal guilt was never established. It's a case where technically her alibi, or rather her false narrative, helped avoid conviction. But in the court of public opinion, her credibility was shot.
Notice a pattern? In each of these, the liars' attempt to cover their tracks had telltale cracks, whether through inconsistencies, Peterson and Stewart, unbelievable details, Susan's far-fetched story, behavioral red flags, Scott's coldness, Casey's bizarre calm, partying while her child was missing, or hard evidence, Fitbit data, CCTV, etc. The truth seeped out.
It often comes down to this. Murder will out people who commit heinous crimes and then lie about it. And it's because they're under immense psychological pressure. They have to maintain this facade in the face of investigators who are actively poking holes in their story. Every lie is a risk, a potential point of failure. And as research shows, liars have a tough time juggling all the moving parts, their words, their body language, their emotions, and the factual reality. They might manage for a while, but eventually most slip up.
Now, we love diving into the science and psychology behind all this. So let's get into that next. Psychologists have studied deception for decades and still say it's hard to perfectly detect lies. There's no magic Pinocchio detector, but how funny and helpful would that be, right?
That would be amazing.
It's like if everybody just had these ticks that we could just pick up on.
A telltale giveaway.
Yeah. I mean, there are a few cues and techniques to help with some reliability.
So we've got cognitive load and cues. Lying, like we mentioned, is mentally taxing. So liars might show signs of that load. They can speak with more pauses, more ums, if they're struggling to fabricate details on the fly. Interestingly, the opposite can also happen. Some liars become very smooth talkers, especially if they practice their story, deliberately avoiding any hesitation. One study from 2024 found the two most reliable cues were speech disfluencies, like stammering or verbal stumbling, and eye contact, but not in the stereotypical way. It's not simply that liars won't look you in the eye, because in fact, experienced liars might overcompensate by staring you down unblinkingly because they know that looking away looks guilty. Others, especially if nervous and inexperienced, might avert their gaze more. The key is deviation from their normal behavior and context.
Next one that we want to go into is emotional leaks. As the FBI bulletin we mentioned noted, high stakes lies often trigger emotions, fear of getting caught, guilt about lying, or even excitement from the thrill. These emotions can leak through facial expressions or tone. Maybe a flash of fear or guilt crosses their face when a tough question is asked, or they smile at a moment when one wouldn't expect. That duping delight that we already talked about there. Also, if someone is pretending to feel an emotion, like faking sadness, they might not do it convincingly. For example, crying without tears or dramatic sobs that stop suddenly. Real emotions are harder to turn on and off.
Another one is verbal content. We've hammered this, but it's worth repeating. What a suspect says is crucial. Liars often give themselves away with words, contradictions, overly vague or oddly specific answers, changes in tense or pronouns, and denial statements that come off as unreliable. Truthful people tend to be consistent and their stories hold up to detailed questioning. Liars, not so much. Studies show people are actually better at detecting lies by listening to someone than by just watching their body language, likely because the words contain more clues if you know what you're listening for.
Importantly, I think there's no single tell. There's no single universal signal of deception. Forget what TV shows tell you. Crossing arms, sweating, or looking left while speaking doesn't automatically mean someone's lying. Each person is different. And like we said, innocent folks can show stress signs also. Investigators are trained to look for clusters of indicators, a pattern of behavior and speech that collectively raises suspicion. And then they corroborate with evidence.
Exactly. Professionals use structured interview techniques to catch liars. We touched on a couple, like making the person recount events multiple times or in different orders to tax a liar's memory. The strategic use of evidence, or the SUE, not revealing what you know and seeing if the suspect lies about something you can disprove, and the verifiability approach, which is asking for details that can be checked out because liars often avoid those. We've also seen in interviews where they've got one piece of evidence that has never been publicized and they see if the person might mention it. And then they can cross-check it because only the person who was there would know.
Right. There's a great episode of Brooklyn Nine-Nine where it's called The Box. It's the main character, Jake Peralta, and he's interviewing a dentist played by Sterling K. Brown. And it's like the entire episode just takes place in the investigation room.
Oh, I love it.
And so it's interesting. They like try a lot of these techniques. And I'm kind of thinking, because there's something, he mentioned something. And, detectives like, I didn't mention that hasn't been made public. And so he's like, oh, yeah, the victim's wife told me. So it's like, it's interesting how they can kind of pick up on things like that. And interesting to see how he tries to like compensate and lie. It's a really, obviously it's a sitcom, so it's funny, but it's an interesting episode to watch too, as we're talking about alibis.
Oh, I like that.
You should add it to your list. I'll send you the link of which one it is.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I think there's also the good old technique of silence. Let the suspect fill the void. Truth tellers with nothing to hide might ask, what else do you need to know? While liars might ramble to shore up their story or slip up due to nervousness.
At the end of the day, detecting deception is as much an art as a science. Real investigators combine these psychology-based techniques with solid evidence gathering. It's the combination that really nails liars. The behavioral cues point cops in the right direction, and then forensic evidence drives the point home.
Exactly. It's like assembling a puzzle. An alibi by itself is just a story. Obviously, you have to test it. If the pieces of the story puzzle don't fit the pieces of the evidence puzzle, something's off.
Exactly. So what have we learned today besides that we might have trust issues now? Essentially.
Already had those.
Yeah, right. How can you not when you, yeah. Anyways. I was going to say when you consume as much true crime as I do.
Yeah.
Essentially, lying to cover a crime is really difficult to pull off. Criminals try all sorts of ways to fake innocence, like creating alibis, putting on performances, roping others into their lies, you name it. But there are almost always cracks, tiny inconsistencies, suspicious behaviors, or stray pieces of evidence that can unravel the whole deception.
We've seen how storytelling, body language, and good old-fashioned contradictions give liars away. Scott Peterson couldn't keep his story straight and it sunk him. Chris Watts' cold demeanor screamed guilt despite his soft words. Susan Smith's crocodile tears dried up when her tail fell apart, and so on. In the end, the truth tends to emerge one way or another, whether via a confession, having a detective catching a lie, or a piece of tech catching you in the act.
From a psychology standpoint, it's a nearly impossible task to lie flawlessly under intense scrutiny. The cognitive load, the emotional strain, the need for consistency under pressure, it's more than most can manage. As a result, liars leak information, and investigators are trained similar to a bloodhound for those leaks.
If nothing else, I hope this episode makes anyone thinking of plotting a murder realize it's a losing proposition. You might think you can outsmart everyone with a clever alibi, but odds are you'll slip up. Maybe you'll say, I was at the gym, but forget the gym has a surveillance camera. Or you'll shed fake tears in an interview that everyone and their grandma can tell are fake. And heaven help you if you forget about your victim's Fitbit or your own Google location history. The receipts will get you.
And for the rest of us normal law-abiding citizens, it's fascinating and a bit chilling to see how these cases unfold. The psychology of lying, especially in such high-stakes situations, shows both the complexity of the human mind and the impressive skills of those who are determined to find the truth. It's like a high-stakes poker game between criminals and investigators. The liars are bluffing for their lives. The detectives are working on calling those bluffs.
In the end, like they say in crime shows, justice will be served. The liars we discussed all face consequences, prison, social condemnation, or in some cases, their own guilt leading to their downfall. Covering your tracks is never as easy as it sounds in theory, and thank goodness for that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that wraps up our deep dive into the psychology of an alibi. We hope you found this as intriguing as we did. I mean, I'll be double checking any fishy stories I hear from now on. No pun intended.
Same. Also, note to self, if Jenna invites me fishing or golfing, I'm going to ask a lot of follow-up questions just to make sure she's not planning anything nefarious.
Don't worry, my alibi for any given time is usually researching true crime cases in my sweatpants, and I have the browser history to prove it.
Yeah, that checks out. Well, thank you for listening, everyone. Stay safe, stay curious, and remember, if someone's story sounds too perfect or their eyes are just a bit too dry during those tears, you might want to raise an eyebrow.
Exactly. And special thanks to all of our sources and studies that helped us unpack this topic. We'll list those on our blog, which you can find linked on our website, crimeclueless.com, under the contributors section. And you can check out all of the very interesting studies that helped us write this. We truly appreciate you spending time with us, and we hope you like our criminal psychology series. It's been super fun to work on. Crazy interesting.
Yeah, I like this one.
Tell us what you think, what you want us to cover. We've got a whole bunch of things in the works. If you've got any others, we'd love to hear what you want us to cover on this series. You can follow us on social media and communicate with us that way. We're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, YouTube. Just search for @CrimeClueless. If you would rather email us, you can, crimeclueless@gmail.com. And if you liked this episode, we would be so grateful if you would share it with anyone else you think might be interested. You can find Crime Clueless on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, iHeart, YouTube, and all major streaming platforms. And with that, remember, refuse to be clueless, careless, or caught off guard.
Not today, murderers.
Bye.
Bye, guys.